Please open your Bibles with me to John chapter 19. John chapter 19, we've seen through Jesus, we've observed as Jesus has gone through this day and night, a night of court proceedings, such as they were. The Jewish trials, plural, have concluded that he is guilty of we'll get into that, but he's guilty and he's worthy of death. And Pilate can't see it, doesn't want anything to do with it, found him not guilty. And we'll look at that some more tonight. But Pilate is stuck between an innocent man, a man he believes is innocent, and an unruly mob that threatens to really cause him trouble. He may look like an ineffective governor if this all gets out of control. And so he's trying his best to weave a very tight line between, I don't think this man has done anything worthy of death, I find no fault in him, and this angry mob that says we want him dead. Even Pilate's wife said, "Don't have anything to do with this. I've suffered many things in a dream." Even Pilate's wife is in his ear saying, "Don't have anything to do with what's going on." So here's the plan. Let's beat him terribly. Let's whip him. Let's scourge him. Let's mock him. And maybe that lust for blood will be satisfied and I can release him. And that wasn't to be the case. So in John chapter 19, look with me at verse 7 is where we'll pick this up. Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." There's so many things that have been said through the course of this proceeding. There's so many things that John or the other gospel writers have written that if you read it casually like you normally would, you just read through it. Behold the man. You just read through it and you don't think, wait a minute. He's saying he's not a king. He's talked to him about that, and he's just a man. And so you look at these things and you say, there's meaning behind. There's a reason John recorded it. And there's a reason John recorded in verse 7 that we have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he had made himself the Son of God. If you're thinking about that, and not just casually reading it, but you're trying to analyze why everything is said, why John chose to record it, you think, wait a minute. They just dropped a nuclear bomb in Pilate's courtroom. This was not something that was ever said before. This was not he was a malefactor, remember? Why is this man in my courtroom? We wouldn't have brought him here if he wasn't a malefactor. He's a troublemaker. He's an insurrectionist. He's going to cause Rome trouble. You need to get rid of him. Pilate even grappled with, "Are you a king? Thou saidst I'm a king." But nobody up to this point that I can find said anything about Jesus being deity until the Pharisees dropped this bomb in the front of Pilate. He's a god? Now Pilate wouldn't be opposed. He wouldn't, as a lost, dead in trespasses and your sins, blinded by the God of this world, he wouldn't have thought, oh, the one true living creator God. His mind wouldn't have went there. He would have recognized probably a plethora of deities. Pick one. I don't want to offend any of them in his mind. And not only that, but we'll read a verse in a little bit where Herod, remember when Herod, part 2 of the Roman trial, Pilate took him over to Herod. And Herod was hoping to see a miracle. So the fact that he can do things is known and on the table. The fact that he's performed miracles is known and on the table. But now the Jews are saying he's a god. And because of that, he ought to die. Well, that's based on Leviticus chapter 24. Leviticus chapter 24. But this thing, and I should have read the next verse, what this revelation has done to Pilate, scared him to death, as we would say. Leviticus 24 and verse 16. And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him, as well as the stranger, as he that is born in the land, when he blasphemeth the name of the Lord, shall be put to death. You can't go around blaspheming the name of the Lord. And they would consider it blasphemy to proclaim, I'm a God, I'm God. And we have a law. By our law, he should die. Verse 8 of our text in John chapter 19. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. Now Pilate is more scared than he ever was. And you can hold your finger here and jump over to Luke 23 and verse 8 to show what I was saying. Luke 23 and verse 8. When Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season. For a long time I wanted to see this guy, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. That's always been percolating in the background. And no doubt Herod, it even talks about in verse 12, that same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. Now they're buddies, and no doubt they've talked about these things. I wanted to see that Jesus walk on water. I wanted to see him perform a miracle. And Pilate maybe just rolls his eyes and says, yeah, whatever, miracles, whatever. Well, here the religious crowd of the Jewish people said, he calls himself God. Now they're doing that as their justification for capital punishment. But it scares Pilate tremendously. Now Pilate is really scared. I have a deity in my courtroom. The rumors of him being able to perform miracles may be true. Can he zap me? Pilate is understandably scared. Now, great. I'm going to make some deity mad at me, and he'll curse me. He'll cause famine in the land or cause some kind of trouble. Great. Pilate's all the more wanting to get out of this. All the more he's running the risk of looking absolutely incompetent from a very practical level. This thing could get me fired. I could lose my rule. And so the announcement of them that he has made himself the Son of God, that equates to, he claims to be God, has scared Pilate to death. So in verse 10, I don't want to skip verse 9. Well, for context, start at verse 8. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? Where are you from? And he's not talking Bethlehem or Judea. Where are you from? Heaven or earth? Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. He's quiet. Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Pilate presses him. Knowest thou not that I have the power to crucify thee, and have the power to release thee? Talk to me, Jesus. I'm holding your life in my hands. I have the power to let you go. I have the power to kill you. Talk to me. Pilate tries his best to put away his fears, to put aside his fears, and press Jesus for an answer. Where'd you come from? He tries to talk tough. Jesus responds to him in verse 11. Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore, he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. Probably at the latter part of that verse, speaking of Judas and the Sanhedrin. But thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. As always, whatever Jesus has to say, we should take and really ponder, really consider. As always, whatever he has to say, there's a lot embedded in those words. You only have the power given to you from above. Except that, and that's how he puts it. Except it were given to you thee from above. You only have the power. You do not, Pilate, have the power to do one thing against me except it were given to you. You do not, Pilate, have the ability to release me, or the authority or ability to release me or to crucify me. It's all given to you. And Romans 13 is very clear about that. That the rulers that be are there by God's appointment. Look with me in Romans chapter 13. The authorities that be. And I take the position, it's primarily talking about the civil government, so we can easily apply that. But wherever the Lord has placed authority in government, authority in the home, wherever the Lord has placed the authority, every soul should be subject to that higher authority. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. God has put order in society. God has put order in the home. God put order in the garden, made Adam head, and it was his responsibility. That's why when the Lord asked him, "What have you done?" I took the fruit and I ate. And the New Testament tells us that Eve was deceived, but Adam did so knowingly. And it was Adam, as the head, was considered responsible. He was delegated that authority by God. Civil governments are delegated that authority by God. And you say, I don't think they're moral. Many times they're not. But they're in place because God put them there. You say, they're not a Christian government. Very few ever were. But God's put them in place. Look what it says. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. That they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For the rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. A government doing what it ought to be doing tries to stop immorality, tries to stop evil. What about those governments that don't, that are actually committing some of the evil? God has allowed them that authority for that period of time. They will be held accountable, no question about that. And they're given that authority, that ability for a season, for purposes. How many times, for purposes known unto God, how many times did God raise up a ruling entity to put Israel in a giant timeout? God raised up a wicked government, a wicked ruler, and did so to take the children of Israel into captivity or some sort of bondage or many different layers to that. All by God's appointment. All by God's allowance, at very least. And what does Romans 9 tell us? For this cause raised he Pharaoh up, made him the most powerful ruler of the most powerful government in the world at that time. Allowed that power to be demonstrated for decades, centuries, so that Romans 9 goes on to say, so that I will show my power in taking it down. And in all of that, what we have to always remember, God is not doing anything immoral or wrong when he allows governments to take over his people, to teach them a lesson, to chastise them. He's operating consistent with his word. Let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Verse 2. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God, authority, civil government, so on, the one in headship. He is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. And so Pilate's acting all tough. We know from the text that he's more afraid now than he's ever been. But he's pressing the Lord. And the Lord's response, you could have no power at all against me, except it were given you from above. One more passage that comes to mind in this realm, Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. And verse 26. As Paul is relating to the Gentile hearers here, and he makes his gospel appeal start with Creator God. And he tells them this Creator God has, verse 26, made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth. And this is the phrase that I wanted you to see. And hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation. Every civilization falls under that purview of God. That is, hath determined times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation. This nation or that nation will grow to this size or that size and last this long or that long, all by the purview of God. All by the prerogative of God. So Pilate's all big and tough, standing before the one who created him. And Jesus says, thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. Verse 12, coupling together with the revelation that Pilate is now grappling with, I might have a deity in my courtroom, and I'd really rather not make any deity mad. And he's talking about delegated power from heaven. Verse 12. And from henceforth Pilate sought to release him. All Pilate wanted to do was to get rid of this situation. He did not want to face it head on. He did not want the mob to get any more out of control. The famous scene in Matthew 27 where he takes the bowl of water and washes his hands. You take him and kill him, but I'm gonna wash my hands of this entire affair. Look at Mark chapter 15. We'll come right back to John, Lord willing. Mark chapter 15, and I think it's verse 15. The first time I turned to John 15. And the soldiers led him away to the hall. And Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them and delivered Jesus, whom he had scourged. Well, when he had scourged him, to be crucified. Pilate is still walking that tightrope. He's washed his hands symbolically. I find no fault in him. Continues to be his mantra. He's just a man. Although the Jews put a wrinkle in that. And here in verse 15, Pilate willing to content the people. He's just trying to get out of today without having an out-of-control mob and not make any deities mad. So he releases Barabbas, washes his hands, Matthew chapter 27, and turns over Jesus. Verse 12 of our text. And from henceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth, sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. He's been handed over. He's going to be crucified. Now that's the end that God had designed for this whole proceeding anyway. Pilate just a tool in the process put there by God. Remember that they needed the Roman law to hang him on a tree. If the Jews would have killed him, if they'd have kept with the law, they would have stoned him. But the prophetic words about what would take place was that he would be lifted up, hung on a tree. And Pilate has just given in to the mob, releasing Barabbas. Jesus came to be crucified. That was by design the end result that was going to be. And he's very, very close to that point at this time. Verse 11 is very sobering. And I leave you with trying to press this upon your mind. You and I only have what we're given by God. You and I have the health that we're given by God. You and I have the safety that is given to us by God. You and I have the number of days that are given to us by God. None of these things are indefinite or open-ended. That is why the Bible says today is the day of salvation. That is why the Bible presses upon the individual to come to Christ now. That is why the Bible presses upon the individual to look to the one who is lifted up. And now we can look back at a lifted up Jesus that died for the sin of his people. The Bible presses an individual with the realization that every heartbeat you have is given to you by God. That every breath you take is given to you by God. We've all heard the accounts of those individuals. We've all heard the accounts of individuals that got sick and over a period of time the disease took their body. We've all heard that. We've also all heard of individuals that were walking along and fell over dead. Young and old. Massive blood clot or something goes really haywire with your heart. These things are all in the hands of God. We could do nothing except that we're given to us of God. And we only have now. Today is the day of salvation. Today is the day to recognize every breath I take is a gift from God. I'm only being about half sarcastic when they ask me at work how I'm doing. When I say almost every time, I woke up this morning. I say the Lord let me wake up this morning. I was able to stand up. I remembered my name. The day's starting out pretty well. When the Lord sees fit to change that arrangement, that's entirely in His hands. Look to the Lord today. Look to the lifted up one and see in Him your only hope. That if today should be the day that I am called to stand before Jesus, I will stand before Him, before whom I have repented of my sins and placed my faith and trust wholly in Him. And though I'm not anxious for that day, I am ready for that day. Are you?